Before it was coming on, I was saying that this is going to be Joe Wilson on steroids. Who is Joe Wilson? He's the guy that famously, disrespectfully yelled at President Barack Obama and said, "You lie." So I knew that Republicans were going to be going for, and Joe Wilson is still in Congress, mind you, but I knew they were going to be going for moments like this. I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to be that kind of over the top foolishness. What I didn't predict is that it would be constant. I thought there would be a few extreme moments, but it was the equivalent of what a performer might go through on the stage, and they have some rowdy people who drank too much in the audience. I mean, it was high octane foolishness. I thought it was disrespectful. I thought that it was unprofessional. And I thought that it just shows you where the GOP is today. This is who they are. Now, what was interesting, though, with President Joe Biden, unlike Obama, and this isn't Obama's fault, he didn't think somebody would do that. Joe Biden saw it coming. So he was actually prepared. And I was actually kind of impressed with the responses that he had. He knew they were going to act up in this way. So they ended up looking quite foolish. They ended up committing as an entire party to not cutting Social Security, which they said they would, but they ended up committing to it. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene looking like she stole some drag queen's coat, screaming and yelling and hollering. I mean, it was so crazy. And I said, wow, it was more performative than I thought it would be. And you know what? They should just go back to writing the State of the Union and releasing it. We don't need this anymore. And what's disturbing, I was texting with Sir Michael Singleton, and he was pointing out, as much as you despise what you saw, it's going to skyrocket their fundraising. The they is the Margie Taylor Greenes. It's the Matt Gaetz. It's all of them who were hollering and screaming. It's going to help their bottom dollar. And even when Trump was in office, you didn't see Democrats doing this. They were wearing all white. Some didn't attend. Folks aren't clapping. But the outbursts, it was like an award show. It was crazy. And we just see how much they have debased these alleged traditions. They have debased Congress. This is who we are. And then you saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders in a speech that had all the talking points that Bill Maher has. Woke, transgender, white kids feel bad. And talking about the future, yet still stroking Trump's ego. You know, she's talking about Biden's age, and she's 40 years old, but Trump is a grown ass man too. But stroking Trump's ego, but saying we have to move forward, we need the future, but indicating Trump is still the future. So this is who the GOP is, and I thought it was really it proves my point. We don't need this State of the Union. It's useless now. With 24-hour news, we don't need it. But hats off to Biden. I thought he did a great job. He was calling them out. They were kind of clowning themselves. But that doesn't matter. Putting out the facts, pointing out the truth, pointing out hypocrisy, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it helps the bottom line of the GOP. Amisha, give us your opening thoughts.
So I disagree with the premise that we don't need the State of the Union because it was utilized by Biden in an expert way to accomplish a couple of goals. One, we know what the polls look like in regards to Americans generally not fully understanding what this administration has done or not really leaning into the accomplishments, the policy goals and achievements of this administration. So he utilized that time to basically tell them in very clear language what it has done, rattle off those stats, tell them about the Build Back Better agenda and what it has done to bring jobs to a community, to a state near you, jobs that will bring six-figure salaries that do not require a college degree or student debt. He outlined the plan, the vision for the Democrats' future. He talked about the reductions in prescription drug prices, specifically for insulin for those who are on Medicare. There was a lot of there. And I think that the American public needed to hear that from the President of the United States. In addition to putting Republicans on blast, the theatrics, the shenanigans, they cannot get any lower. The bottom is hell, and they are there, and they are enjoying it and reveling in it. I think that Joe Biden did exactly what he needed to do. He showcased the strength of this administration, despite the Republican Party that essentially does not want to see things move forward. He showcased that he is the leader in the room.
You know, I hear you. You could be right, and you're right as far as what Biden did. But the truth of the matter is, most Americans aren't paying attention to that. Most Americans are just going to watch the clips.
But if there was a speech given, and if it was just a printed document, there would be no clips to see.
Yeah, fair enough. What are your thoughts, Keith? Where do you stand?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good argument you make, because originally, of course, there was no performed State of the Union. It was just a written text that was delivered from the president to Congress. And the Constitution doesn't require a speech to be given. And it's become a tradition in America starting in the 20th century. Ronald Reagan, I think, famously made it more performative because he started inviting guests to come to attend in the audience and sort of exploiting those people. And it's always been sort of a cringy type of thing that presidents do, but it's become a tradition. I do think we do need a State of the Union address. And I think partly for the reasons that Amisha mentioned, because what last night's performance did is it illustrated the differences between the two parties. And you can't get that in a written text. You can't get that in a statement that is printed out in digital format. You need to see that, to see Cruella DeVille, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is standing up there yelling at the President of the United States, calling him a liar, to see George Santos being called out by his own party, by Mitt Romney, to see Republicans refuse to stand up and cheer when the president talked about basic bread and butter issues, or talked about the importance of protecting people from police brutality, or talked about just any sort of normal idea that most Americans support. You need to see that. The American people need to see that. So I think it's interesting because it's actually good for both parties, although I think it's bad for America. It's good for both parties because President Biden did an excellent job last night. He really showcased, I think, the differences between the two parties and made himself the leader of the party, the leader of the country, in a way that people could see. Republicans did not try to do that. And, Kevin McCarthy had a difficult enough time just trying to maintain his caucus to get elected. But the Republicans were a mess. But they, as Amisha said, are campaigning on being a mess. That's what makes them electable in their red district.
Keith, hold on one second. You said it's good for both parties.
Yeah, but bad for America.
It's bad for America.
Yeah. That's the point I'm making. It's good. It's good. The process itself is not good or bad for America. What happened last night, I think, was good for both parties, but bad for America. I mean, what I mean by that is that the White House was doing high fives and cheering after the speech last night. They were loving the repartee with the Republicans because it illustrated their point. But the problem is that the Republicans were doing the exact same thing.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
And this is the reason why it's bad for America, because the Republicans are no longer a governing party. They're not trying to persuade anybody to believe in them. They just want to get their 40% base to be riled up about everything, which is the reason why Sarah Huckabee Sanders gave that tone-deaf speech about Biden and his woke mob and the critical race theory and all this other stuff that had nothing to do with anything Biden was talking about. Biden's talking about bread and butter issues and credit card fees and airline fees and resort fees and talking about how do we make people's lives better and give them jobs and healthcare and insulin prices and prescription drugs. And she's talking about a woke mob. That's what the Republicans are campaigning on.
But this is what I'm saying. I would have rather. I think what it does, it inadvertently platforms this demonic GOP. I would have rather he just give a televised speech, don't have all these damn folks in the room, cut all the clapping.
I disagree.
It platforms these people.
Clay, he would have
I
been
don't.
ripped
I don't.
apart. This is the same party that
Who
advanced the whole
cares?
Sleepy Joe
They're still
narrative, the
ripping him.
same party that advanced that he wasn't doing anything, even though we see all of the legislation that has been passed into law. This is the same. It would have done him no favors to have not been physically, visibly
So
there.
so
And
so
to
so
his
here's my
credit, this is the
question.
strongest speech the man has given in a very long time.
So here's my question: so we're going to have this moving forward. We're going to have a circus State of the Union moving forward. I just don't see how this helps us. It's going to be a
Well,
circus. This is
let me push back on that for a few reasons. One, first of all, these people are already platformed. They're members of Congress. They're not like radio show hosts or talk radio or insurrectionists. They are members of Congress. The majority of the House of Representatives elected by American people, the American people. So you can't just dismiss them and say that the president is giving their platform. Secondly, I do think it is critical. It's important to have the president have that contrast, because you can't just get up there and give a televised speech and not have that response. If you want people to understand why he's not able to accomplish some of these things, because I heard people last night on the left saying, "Oh, Biden's giving us this laundry list of progressive ideas, but he's not going to do any of these things." Yeah, you know what? He's not going to do almost any of those things because he has a obstructionist, unruly, obstreperous
Congress.
House of Representatives that refuse to go along with that, and that's what people need to see. So they can't just say, "Well, Biden isn't doing his job as president." They need to see George Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and all the other Republicans who aren't doing anything except for stopping things from happening. They need to see that contrast. And I think that's a critically important part that you're missing about that.
Plus, I think that, Biden's whole slogan, motto has been this fighting for the soul of the nation, battling for the soul of the nation. We saw very clearly the contrast, to Keith's point, between the Biden administration and basically the Republican Party, because the argument from Republicans has always been, or the argument that even some Democrats has had, well, it was just a handful of Republicans. It's not the entire party. These are Trump Republicans. This is the crazy caucus. No, it is the Republican Party. And I think that we have to be very serious about that, because there is no way that this caucus shouldn't have been able to sit in that room, have the decorum, respect the president of the United States. We've seen people who didn't necessarily enjoy what a president said before. The folks who held the newspapers up while he was talking. We've seen, folks who didn't heckle, but had these, to your point earlier, who just didn't show up to the State of the Union. We've seen the troll accounts on social media. However, showing up, squealing out like a mad woman, meanwhile wearing a fur coat when it's 55 degrees outside in DC. It was a lot of interesting, crazy going on at the same time. And remember, this is the same woman who wanted to bring in a white balloon to mimic the China balloon that we shot down, but the sergeant at arms was not going to have that. This is a party that is off the hinges. This is a party that is no longer a fringe, as some people would like to say that they are, because they're trying to court that Trump base. Many of them don't want Trump again, but they definitely want those Trump voters. So they're going to act a damn fool for as long as they can, irrespective to Americans wanting those jobs, Americans wanting a pathway to higher employment without student loan debt, Americans wanting to have childcare assistance, Americans wanting to have early childhood education and healthcare that's affordable. All of these things are things that the American public generally wants, whether you are blue, red, purple, or anywhere in between. But the Republican Party is unrelenting. And I think that was one of the things that Biden was proof positive in showcasing last night.
866-801-8255, 866-801-8255. What did y'all think of the State of the Union? Let me say this, and I'll give it back to y'all, Keith. Back to you, Keith. I hear what y'all are saying. I appreciate it. I do. I really, really do. But I got to say this, and I mean this with love. Y'all are saying that there is this contrast, and we saw who the Republican Party is. We are in our bubbles. We claim there's this contrast, but the other side of it, as their fundraising is skyrocketing, they're seeing the contrast with the Democrats. And I think if it's disrespectful, and mind you, I see what y'all are saying, but the other side is saying the same exact thing. Oh, look how much so-and-so lied. Look at it. I think I don't want to see the circus.
Well,
and the majority of Americans aren't going to sit down and watch that for an hour and 20 minutes or whatever it was. So I just wonder, Biden did phenomenal. But how does it help us? How does it help the average voter in Mississippi or in Georgia or in Pennsylvania or Michigan? So we see this almost like a reality show lunacy, And for us who
Oh,
are in it, we absorb it. But I don't. The
I
contrast that we think is out there, I think that's a bit of a myth. It's just people on their other sides. How does it help? Go ahead, Keith, and we'll go to a call.
I don't know. I just feel like first of all, I've been off the scene for a while. I quit Twitter a few months ago. I came back last night just to post about this. I had been off Twitter since November. I deactivated my account. And part of the reason why is because I wasn't even going to watch the speech. I was reluctant to watch the speech. I was like, this is going to be a mess. I'm Biden's going to be boring. The Republicans going to be crazy. I have no interest in watching this. But it's my job, so I watched it. And the first 2 or 3 minutes, I was like, why is he speaking so quickly? He's going too fast, needs to slow down. But then it became clear what he was doing. He wanted to show that he had vigor. He wanted to show that he had energy, that he wasn't, even though he's 80 years old, he can still run the country. And he wanted to ward off any other challenges for the Democratic nomination. I understood all that. But, I think that it was an important opportunity for him. And I think it was a well done speech for him. And I think what we're missing is that, the Republicans are campaigning off of this because they aren't trying to appeal to the majority of the American people. Last thing I just been meaning to say for the past 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so, is that I'm not troubled by the chaos. This democracy is messy. We are so out of touch with the way our country started. People used to fight each other in Congress. They used to literally fight. They had physical altercations in the House of Representatives. I'm not saying we need to go back to that, obviously, but I mean, I think we have this idea that somehow it's always been this sort of majestic theatrical event where everybody comes together and they're all respectful. This has not been the history of our country to be so respectful. No, I appreciate that. And I didn't like the fact they chose to stop doing it when Obama was the president. They called him a liar. But, if you go to the UK, you watch the prime minister's questions, they yell and scream at the prime minister every day. Every week when the prime minister appears, so I don't think the president should be some sort of emperor of the throne who can't be subjected to questions or interrogation or even scrutiny and ridicule. I don't have a problem with that at all. So I guess I'm against the grain of those people who think, oh, this is so unbecoming of the United States of America. That's baloney. This is who America's always been. We've whitewashed our history to the point we've forgotten who we really were and who always have been.
It's historical decorum, I think, in the era of television. To your point, Keith, that this is not the first time we had a Froxus, anything as it relates to a president delivering a message. It just happened throughout history as well. But I think that in the era of these things being televised, that we have not seen it as intensely. Now, Europe, they act the fool all the damn time. Like, it's just like regular.
China?
That's just
China
kind of
acts
what
up,
they
yes.
do. That the decorum in that space is not really there. So there is no expectation that they're not going to be challenging, that they're not going to put on a show. And I don't think people bat an eye because it has been happening forever. In this case, something you said earlier really struck a chord, Clay. I think that obviously Joe Biden anticipated the foolery. Part of that is because they talked about the foolery on social media for a week before the SOTU even happened. The other part is he had the great luck of the draw in being President Obama's VP. Right. He saw the foolery from some then. So yes, you can prepare for post foolery because America has only become more divided since the two administrations of the Obama administration, fast forward to today. But in addition to that, again, I think he was ready and he was going to play into it. And that was one of the things I actually thought was good because it shows Democrats what they're up against. It also shows that he has the chutzpah because a lot of people just naturally assume that he is kind of soft and squishy and he's not up for that level of, battle anymore. But to Keith's point, I don't know how this would not have also helped Republicans. I think Republicans would have walked out of there with some type of win regardless, just because their base expects them in their antics at this point. And they get more excited when they see more of these antics pop out. That's just the current base of the Republican Party. And I don't know if it's ever going to resort back to anything else because it looks like their level of enjoyment about this is extremely high, even up to and including the response speech that wasn't responding to anything that Biden actually said.
Although it doesn't help the Republicans in the swing districts, though, those districts that Biden won, that they barely won in 2022. Those Republicans need to have a different image. And so those people will be in trouble in 2024 because of it.
I do want to point out, though, that decorum that we once upon a time had, that changed with Obama.
Yeah.
It just changed. So I hear y'all. Maybe I'm too much of a cynic. Maybe I'm too much on my little, I don't know, but I really don't think it was ultimately helpful for the country. I just kind of feel like y'all that we're in this versus culture. We're in this viral clip kind of culture, and that's a lot of what I saw yesterday, last night. And we're in this battle culture, and that's what the GOP prepared themselves for last night. And thankfully, Biden did too because he knew he had to. And ultimately, I just don't see how it adds to our democracy. I don't see how it helps. I think both people feel like both parties are being exposed. I just wonder what's the long game of this. And I don't know if this really incentivizes non-voters because everything Biden said was true, but he's been saying that, back in the day you had 5 or 6 channels, you didn't see the president that much. You didn't hear pundits all the time arguing. Everything he said has been said 1,000 times over, but I don't know, maybe I was a little bit exhausted, and I was just kind of hurt for the country at what I saw.